Hey.
Hello.
Nice. Fancy seeing you here.
Right? Um, Hi everyone. We are back at it again from our mini break from the earlier sessions. If you're just joining us, we're gonna do our spiel, our little intros and housekeeping. If you were here for the prior two sessions, thank you for sticking around. Maybe you can add like 5 more minutes to your break as we repeat the same information for our new folks joining us. But if you are new, or if you just want to do it again, drop your information in the chat, your socials, where you're tuning in from. We know folks are tuning in from all around the world. We saw, what was it, Madagascar, Philippines, Nigeria, Mexico, a lot of folks here in the US as well. We're just taking notes of where we need to go when we ever take
Yes,
this abroad, like our international tour.
the
Um,
global tour. Yeah.
we are taking notes. This is incredible to see everybody spending time with us. I know there's a million things you could be doing over the weekend. So thank you for spending time with us and getting this free game, free knowledge from our incredible speakers. If you missed the first two classes for today, don't worry, they were being recorded and they're going to be made available on our respective sites in English, French, and Spanish in the coming weeks. What else am I missing here? Okay,
Sorry,
then
sorry, sorry. That was an accident. Polly, we should do like a raffle or something like for the person who, because we've had also in the chat, if you tell us what session this is for you, if you've been repeat years, but we should do like a raffle giveaway of like whoever can like raise your hand, who can repeat the intro. Whoever can do that wins like, I don't know, a
when's
high
this
five.
role? You can come host next year.
Yeah, yeah. Oh no, we have too much fun, Polly.
No,
You
I
can host
know. It's
with
my
us.
favorite project. It
Yeah.
really is, truly. As we
Uh,
mentioned, this is season 5, so that means there was 4 previous seasons that you can go check out of the essentials. It's made possible by our organizations and our beautiful partner, Photo Wings. And I'm jumping ahead of myself, but go ahead, Danielle.
that's okay.
Give some
No, you're
insight
good.
to who the
You're good.
Everyday Project is.
Yes. So yeah, so as Polly mentioned, what did Polly mention? Hello, hi. My name is Danielle Viasana. That is me. And in addition to my work as a photojournalist, I'm also a community team member of the Everyday Projects, which is one of those grassroots photo organizations that Polly mentioned, working so hard to increase inclusivity, equity, and access in the media. So in addition to my work as a photojournalist, I'm on the community team of the Everyday Projects, again, which is one of those organizations. And we are a global community that uses imagery to combat harmful misperceptions and to rise above persistent inequality with our camera, with our visual storytelling. Super cool. And I'm here with the amazing one and only, love you so much, amazing Polly Arungu, who is the founder of Black Women Photographers. Please tell us more about your amazing work that you do every day.
Every day, every second. No.
Every second.
I- just, it's just here and there. Yeah, I've seen some folks in the chat who are members, which is amazing to see. As Danielle mentioned, we are a nonprofit organization doing the work to help elevate Black creatives in whatever niche they are. This weekend is focusing on photojournalists and documentary photographers. So, it's just resources like this that folks could utilize to further their practice. Yeah.
And then
And
Photo Wings.
yeah,
Polly and I
sorry.
are rusty after the break. Polly and I are like, we're like, no, you go. No, you go. We're like those
I know. It's
chipmunks. We're
like
like
I
the
hate
chipmunks.
hearing my own voice. It's
We're
like
too
I
polite.
can't. Um,
Hey, you keep going, Polly.
okay,
I'm gonna
okay.
mute my mic.
So as Danielle and we've mentioned in previous sessions, but this is a free weekend of educational knowledge, free educational programming. And how do we make it free? With our incredible sponsor, Photo Wings. Photo Wings is a nonprofit organization dedicated to utilizing the power of photography To further deeper thinking, communication, and action, their extensive online content and photo wings outreach programs have myriad educational applications and possibilities. And so with their help, we're able to make this free and accessible to all who are tuning in with us this weekend. We have just such an incredible lineup of speakers. We had 2 classes today. About to start our 3rd and final session for the day, and we just will keep this amazing energy going into tomorrow as well. So at any point, if you want to run back a session, miss something that you heard, maybe you're too busy taking notes, don't worry. Everything's being recorded, available on our socials, our sites. There's the screen. Follow us. Tell your favorite storytellers, your fellow storytellers, whoever, that these sessions are here and free every year.
Yes, forever and ever, and in French and Spanish too on our website. So definitely bookmark all of that. And now
our incredible session with Corinne. Oh, Danielle, giving me such life. I'm gonna hopefully do justice, Corinne, here with this introduction because you're just phenomenal. To round out the deep conversations from earlier today, we now have here with us the super strong, superstar, super driven Corinne Chin, guiding us through how to keep yourself safe, both in physical and virtual worlds. Which is especially timely right now. I think like every year, like these classes just really hit with whatever's going on in this world. But as the digital age is like evolving, she is here to help us keep in mind what we need to do with best practices, tips, tricks, and resources. She will provide a step-by-step guide on what you can do now to lessen vulnerabilities, both out in the field on assignment or just online, keeping your mental and emotional health centered in the process. And how does she know all of this? Well, of course, she has the receipts to back it up. She is the director of news talent for recruitment at the Associated Press, AP. And before joining AP, she was a senior video journalist at the Seattle Times, whose coverage of femicide on the US-Mexico border earned her a National Emmy Award. Her video journalism has also been recognized by the National Edward R. Murrow Awards, Online News Association, National Press Photographers Association's Best of Photojournalism, Pictures of the Year International, and more. So Corinne takes all this knowledge and pays it forward by teaching safety and security to journalists, reporting in increasingly hostile environments. And to top it all off, she is the co-director of AAJA's Women and Nonbinary Voices and past president of AAJA Seattle. Okay. I hope I did you justice there. Thank you so much for joining us in your very, very busy schedule.
Well, thank you, Polly. It's so great to be here, and I'm really happy and was really honored that you invited me here to talk about this really important topic, which I think in our industry, we have often talked about really just focusing on the physical, right? And also, at least before I started becoming a safety trainer, it was all about like what I needed to do and the responsibility. I just felt that sense of individual responsibility so much. And it doesn't have to be that way, and it shouldn't be that way. And that's kind of what I'll talk about. I'm going to preface this by saying, I have like an hour from now, basically, and there's no possible way that we could get into talking about every risk mitigation technique that's out there in that hour. So I have like 300 slides, not that I'm going to show today, but that I have on my computer. So that being said, I really want this to be useful to this group and useful to you. So please use the chat liberally. I'm going to try to keep an eye on it. And I know that Polly and Danielle will also keep an eye on it and tell me if I'm missing something. I can pivot, partway through the conversation, depending on what really is of concern to you all right now. And I know that what is of concern to a lot of us right now in the US is the election that's coming in a few weeks. But I also know that this group is not only focused on the US. So that is my long way of saying, please just talk to me during this. I want to feel like I'm in the room with you as much as possible. And I also, I'm going to be showing you some of my own work today that's like not good work that I'm not proud of in the context of, what can we do to keep ourselves and each other safe? So with that kind of exposition, let me try to find my screen here on the Zoom so I can share it with you. Okay. And so someone holler if anything starts to malfunction during this on your end, but whose
So far, so
safety?
good. Yep, sorry. Looks great.
Thank you. So, when we talk about safety, like I said, I think the way that it had been framed to me was like, you got to do X, Y, and Z in this order to be safe, right? You have to put the ballistic helmet on, you have to get the body armor. And that's not, it shouldn't be all on. We're not just talking about our own, and we're not just talking about our own safety. My point here is safety is collective. It's a community effort. And so today, as we go through the rest of the slides, we want to be thinking not just about yourself, but also about your colleagues. And especially in this environment where, media is, it's a very polarized environment where, there are certain perceptions of the media in many regions of the world. We need to think about our colleagues. We also need to think about our sources. That's a responsibility that we have as journalists, and as well as our families and our friends and our loved ones and our companies and everything that radiates out from that core of yourself, right? So again, this is a community effort. This is something that is really important to me. And if there's one thing that you take away from today's presentation, it is just that, we are competitors when it comes to getting the story first or best, but we're not competitors when it comes to keeping each other safe in difficult situations, right? Okay. So, okay, I hope you are all warmed up on the chat and ready to type. But just throw in the chat, what are some threats that we face as journalists? And, maybe what are some of the threats that most concern you as a journalist? This will also help me guide today's presentation. And there are no wrong answers. Of course, there are threats like political violence and election-related civil unrest, like I alluded to earlier, but you can also just say, social media is a threat, right?
Okay, we've got someone saying populist political candidates keep referring to journalists as enemies. Oof, dang, we're just like going right in. Yep.
Diving right in. Yeah, absolutely. That is definitely a threat that's top of mind for me, and for all of us at AP. Anything else?
Hacking, be it emails, socials, etc.
Absolutely. Now we're going into the cyber realm, right?
Mhm.
But cyber online can quickly go offline and come into real life. So keep on brainstorming, keep on thinking about this. Yeah, criminal elements.
Okay, you see the chat, Corinne. Okay, cool.
Yeah, thanks. I like hearing your voice though, so don't be a stranger. Um,
Hello.
Yeah, climate change, climate and weather. Oh my gosh, Julie, I did not put that in the next slide that I'm about to reveal, but that is huge. I mean, we just had so many journalists covering the recent hurricanes in Florida at AP running out of gas, losing connection, all the way up to North Carolina, use of AI in the hands of bad actors. Yes, absolutely. If you choose to report on corruption, you have to be on the run. Okay, so these are all things that we face doing our jobs as journalists today. And not to bullying, police harassment, hackers, information stealing. And this slide is not at all meant to scare you. I just want to be clear, but I just want to, part of addressing risk and part of managing risk is first identifying those risks. And you all have done a really good job of identifying risks in kind of all of these categories. And, like I said, I think so often we're thinking about the physical, and we are admittedly going to focus a lot on the physical today. But it's really important not to overlook, especially today, all of these cyber risks. We sometimes laugh about like phishing attacks and being tricked into clicking on a link, but that is a huge risk right now, especially in the US, leading up to this election, with so many accusations of things being tampered with. I'm not going to get too much into this because I'm not a lawyer, but legal risk is a big thing. And I know that the Reporters Committee for Freedom of the Press has a lot of great resources that you may want to review. Reputational risk is one that a lot of people, kind of forget to mention. And, not just how sensitive all of our content is and how it can be, spun or twisted or deep faked or any of that. But there's also, we're seeing a lot more people impersonating journalists to try to get us on camera, us who are journalists on camera, and incriminate us doing things that maybe are not as maybe we're trying to goad us into stating an opinion or to get a rise out of us. So we're seeing a lot of these, what we call media ambush groups lately, especially in political journalism. And then, of course, let's not overlook the financial, challenges that we're all facing. So this slide, again, not to scare you, but this is just to highlight that there are all these different facets that I want us to keep in mind as we think about, what is a risk. It's not just a risk to our bodies, but it's also a risk to us psychologically, socially, psychosocial. We're going to talk more about that word later, and in all of these other realms. And so I want to just define what I mean when I talk about risk. And this is a graphic that I spent way too much time making last night that I am very proud of. And it contains all of the risks. I mean, not all of the risks, but many of the risks you saw on that slide and more, including banana peel. I like that one. But what this slide is meant to show is that every day we deal with so many risks. And that is what I'm going to call in today's presentation inherent risk. That is just inherently the risks that we face as journalists. And what we're going to talk about today is about the controls and the funnel that we can put in place in order to leave behind residual risk. And I put a little seatbelt there because that's what this is. This is just putting on the seatbelt. It's, driving a car or riding in a car is actually very risky and very dangerous, but the seatbelt makes it a lot safer. So we're still taking risks as journalists all the time, every day. But we can put that funnel together to really leave residual risk. And another way that we can look at this concept is that when we have no risk mitigation and we go on assignment, some of them can feel a lot like that guy on the left who's just hanging on with one hand, with no harness, no ropes, no safety. And so what we want to do is apply security measures, use this rope of networks, and just leave that residual risk behind. And like I said earlier, it takes a village, right? It's not just, he didn't lay all those ropes by himself. It took other people helping. It's a collaborative and it's a community, and it's, yes, network. It's exactly right. So before we get into kind of the juicy, meaty stuff, I want to establish a few other frameworks that I really think are important. First being identity. Identity is core to safety. And I think this is something that historically, when we were talking about safety in journalism, when we're talking about like embedding it with units, it's not really something we talked about. And thankfully, we're talking about it more. But as you'll see, there's concentric circles. Identity is how I see myself. How do I identify? I, Corinne, identify as let's just say I identify as an Asian American woman video journalist in any given assignment. But once you zoom out a little bit, your profile is how others see you. And it's really, really important to remember that profile and identity are not one and the same. As much as we wish they were, as much as we wish that the world saw us truly for who we are inside, that is not true all the time. And it can be affected by the way that you're presenting yourself on any given day, by what you're wearing, by what gear you brought with you, right? Like if I bring my huge Sony FS5 with a cinema lens and a big tripod, that's a really different profile than if I have my Sony A7 III with a 50 millimeter. I'm not a Sony commercial. I'm sorry I used both Sony examples, but maybe they should sponsor this. But that really changes your profile. And then the last circle, the biggest circle, is a situation. So where do you and your team, whoever's with you, whoever's working with you, and even who's not physically with you, who's back in the office, who's back at the desk, how do they fit in the wider cultural and political context? The situation changes, can be really volatile. It can change a lot. And so can these other things in turn. Your profile can change as well. And of course, we all know that we grow as humans and individuals, and our identities can change. But why is that important? Because, of course, the way people see you and the way people interpret you in any situation can affect your safety. We've all probably been in places where we've been a minority, or where we felt unwelcome based on our race, gender identity, religion, what have you. Also, just keep in mind the things that are not as permanent. So your clothing, are you wearing all black? Are you wearing PPE? Are you wearing this big press vest and this helmet that this person is wearing on the left? Do you have a lot of camera bags and gear? Like, are they fancy with the branding on them? I actually would sometimes just throw my camera in a blue IKEA bag and carry that around. So that's a different profile, right? And one I think that we forget about a lot is that our behaviors as journalists can make us stick out. So taking pictures and conducting interviews, that's not exactly like a normal behavior for people every day. It draws attention to us. Um, as there are more kind of social media influencers doing similar things and asking people to go on camera, like we probably have all seen, a reel or a TikTok where the person does not respond very well to that. And that's something that that's a changing situation, right? A changing situation that we should be considering. Okay, and one more framework that I want to review before we get into the case study, and that's biopsychosocial. You might have heard this if you have attended a DART Center training on trauma and journalism. They are really, really wonderful at using this framework. But what I think you need to know today for this session is that we are biopsychosocial creatures. And this is what makes us human, right? We're wired to survive. If we get thrown into a body of water, we will start treading water. Babies will start doing that, right? We're also wired psychologically to make meaning. So that's why this brain has puzzle pieces, because we take, different elements of our environment and we connect them together and we make a narrative out of it. And that's what we are really good at. All of us in this Zoom room are really good at as journalists. We are visual storytellers. We help people take all those pieces and make sense of it. But where this can go wrong is when people seek to make meaning in situations that might not make a lot of sense. And we see this a lot in trauma victims, where they might fall prey to conspiracy theories, for example. And on that note of conspiracy theories, I just want to remind us we're all wired to attach. Humans are social animals. We cannot survive alone. I mean, I guess technically we could, but it's not really how we have evolved. We've evolved to rely on each other and to form communities, and to serve roles in those communities. But that also can lead to groupthink. It can lead to crowd crushes and stampedes, which is why, when one person starts running, we kind of just have that urge to all start running. And so I just want you all, we might come back to this. I might just like stop sharing and come back to this slide throughout this presentation, because I think it's really, really important for us all to remember that every aspect of security, every aspect of any difficult situation or any trauma you go to, whether or not that's work related or journalism related, this is what makes us human, is that this is what we do. This is how we tend to revert. And so all of that kind of like textbook lecture stuff aside, now we're going to dive into a case study. And this is not a case study of a perfectly executed security situation. I want to make that really, really clear. We've definitely made some mistakes in this situation. But we also did some things well. So don't watch this and think, okay, this is what I'm supposed to do. And don't watch this and think this is what I'm not supposed to do. And actually, I also want to say there's never a situation where there's a supposed to do, right? Like even when we have PPE, like there are situations when it's maybe not personal protective equipment. There are situations where it doesn't make sense because it actually raises our profile, for example. It makes us stick out more. It makes us more of a target to have that. So there's no blanket right or wrong way to do anything. It is all case by case. And I know that can sound really scary, but don't worry. We're going to walk through a template and a tool later where we can use it to apply to any assignment. This will all make sense in a little bit, but for now, let's just get into the case study. And I have chosen the George Floyd protests from summer 2020 in Seattle, Washington. I was a senior video journalist at the Seattle Times at the time, and I had, been mostly focusing on enterprise storytelling, but of course, with big breaking news, we're all kind of thrown back into it. And I think that's really important for everyone to know, because I was maybe a little, I'll say this, I was maybe a little bit out of practice on covering things like civil unrest for the Daily Report. I had covered civil unrest extensively around the world before then as an AP intern in Nairobi, as an intern in Johannesburg. And then before the World Cup in Brazil, there were a lot of protests. I was covering those as well. But I've been out of it for a few years. So I think that's an important thing to know before going into it. And then before I kind of describe that day, I also want you to meet my colleagues, Ramon and Amanda, in these photos, because we're going to look at some of the footage from my camera from this day, May 30th. And I want you to be able to recognize them. So Ramon Dompor is just one of the most talented video journalists I know. He's on the left, and this particular day he was wearing this very distinctively colored windbreaker. So hopefully it'll be easy for you to spot him in the footage. Just as I'm talking right now, put a few more things in the chat that you're noticing about our profiles, about what we're wearing, what we have on us. There's no right or wrong answers here. You can make judgments on if we're doing the right or wrong thing if you want, but you don't have to. You can just point out what you're noticing, such as masks. So Ramon Dompor, and hi if you're out there, I don't know if you are, but he is a video journalist. And then in the picture on the right, you see me, right? Me in my turquoise Patagonia with my colleague Amanda Snyder, who is a photographer, a still photographer at the Seattle Times at the time. And I guess a couple other details I'll share just to give context is like I worked at this time with Ramon all the time. Like we don't even, hopefully still to this day, we can communicate really well non-verbally in the field so that we don't mess our audio up. We kind of get each other's rhythms, and we know that if things, I start shooting more details and he'll start zooming out a little more. So we work really well together. I hadn't really worked with Amanda that much. She, at this point, was a bit newer to the staff as a still photographer, and, just a different team, stills versus video, right? Okay, we have some really nice observations here. It's not obvious that we're working. Thank you, I'm flattered. Masks, yes. This was like right when we all got our masks back, or not back, but we got access to masks after the shortage in that early 2020 period. We do have large bags of gear, especially me. It's kind of dwarfing me, right? Some people like our shoes that feel that they're comfy and protective, goggles. And then somebody noticed, like, do we have our media badges on us? So that's a question that maybe we'll come back to later. And the hat, are the glasses for pepper spray, water bottle in the pocket? Yes, good observations, everyone. Very, very good detail-oriented eyes here. So remember all of this. We're gonna probably come back to some of these details as we get through the case study. So it is May 30th, 2020. It is 1 p.m. So at 1 p.m., Ramon and I returned to the Seattle Times newsroom to grab lunch after spending the morning filming a peaceful protest at police headquarters. We're relieved that at this point, the crowd was nothing like what we were seeing in Minneapolis earlier in the week, with fires, with a lot of arrests. It was very peaceful in Seattle at this point. The next protest is downtown at 3 p.m. We run into Amanda in the newsroom, and she asks if she can ride there with us after she finishes filing her photos from the morning event, and we agree. Amanda doesn't finish filing her photos until about 2:30 p.m., but Ramon and I are way too busy enjoying lunch to notice the time. We're not in a rush. We are very comfortable. Then Ramon drives us all downtown, but the crowd is massive and streets are blocked. It is 2:45 p.m. There's no time to find parking before that 3 p.m. start. Ramon tells us to hop out of the car while he parks, and he will find us later. So I just want to show you a little bit of what we are seeing. And so let's see, is it going to play? It's not going to play. One second here. Okay, trying to show a little bit of footage. I'm sorry if it's a little bit laggy. I think I've got a lot going on a screen here, but we're seeing these big crowds is what you need to know. We're seeing it's very crowded. You can tell it's rainy a little bit. And I'm going to ask you to participate in the chat. I'm not sure if we loaded up in the poll, but if not, we can just do the chat. It's quiz time. Knowing the situation, what should we do next? Should Amanda and I hop out of the car because we're late? I will share my phone location with Ramon so he can catch up with us later. Or should we insist on finding a parking spot together so we don't get separated, but we'll risk missing the moment, which would mean the Seattle Times won't have any relevant coverage? So weigh in the chat. We have hop out, we have don't get separated. Okay. Safety first. Yeah, lots of stick together, lots of pop. I feel like it's about 50-50 here. Okay, but now, like, what did we do? What do you think? What did you think we actually did as breaking news photojournalists? Yeah, we definitely hopped out. You're all 100% right about that. Amanda and I hopped out and we were kettled right away. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with the concept of a kettle, it's when a line of police, just like what you're seeing here, surrounds a group of people with the intent either to disperse that crowd or to detain that crowd. So to break up the crowd and have you leave, or to detain, arrest, process. You can see me at the lower left hand of this. I circled myself. You can see just like a hint of my turquoise windbreaker. And so that building on the left is, I'm just going to set the stage for you. That building on the left is Nordstrom. And the building on the right, or actually that column on the right, is the monorail right in front of the Nordstrom rack. But what you need to know here is that Amanda and I are pinned up against that Nordstrom. We're within this kettle, this perimeter of police officers. We're face to face with a police officer with a bike that's kind of holding us in. We can't move. We can't move at all. We're stuck. So I got a question. Did we use our journalist credentials? Yeah, I did. I took out my badge and I said, hey, officer, we're with the Seattle Times. I've got this 70 to 200 lens, or I even think I had a 100 to 400. Like, clearly I'm a professional journalist. Can you please let us up to the rally so that we can record the speakers? And I mean, the police officer just didn't even bat an eye. And for me, this is kind of where it becomes relevant that I'd been out of it for a while. That really surprised me, and it probably shouldn't have, because when I covered those protests in Brazil or Nairobi, we were really protected by law enforcement at that time, and we were also protected by demonstrators because they wanted to get their stories out there. And this was just a different dynamic. It was a very different dynamic. And so I think I have a question here about, do we talk about what we need to tell the story, which is maybe probably the second most important thing that I want you all to take away from this, which is, talking about the story and what we need to tell the story is the most important safety conversation. It's not, do we have the right PPE? It's not, do we have a satellite phone for when the connection drops? The most important thing is, should we even be here? Is this story important enough to be proportionate to the risk, right? So I'm going to try to show this video here. I know that there was some lagging, so I apologize if I need to kind of stop and restart. But before I do that, I want to show, I want to have some content awareness. There are loud sounds in this video. It can be at times difficult to watch. It is the moment of dispersal. So that moment where the police line decided to move from containment, which is just keeping the crowd contained, to dispersing the crowd. And so this is footage from my camera rolling right after right after we were pepper sprayed, essentially. So I'm going to try to turn my video off and hope with the playback. Okay, I'm going to try one more thing. One sec.
He's a Nazi, I think. It's baking soda. It's baking soda.
Yeah, you got me some. You want some? Oh, but this is fucked up.
How did you know? Oh, you're muted, Corinne.
Well, the graphic says it all. So, oops, hold on. I had joined the Zoom on my phone so that I could play back that. Oh, good now. Graphic says it all. We're going to do a little bit of collective box breathing. And this is partially to come down from that very intense footage, but also partially to give you all a new tool in your toolbox. This is a really great grounding technique. Some of you might already be familiar with this technique, maybe if you've done yoga. But the idea is that we are going to just breathe in for 4 counts. Inhale, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, exhale, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4. So this is a way to just get our heart rates stabilized again, to lower it. And if you all remember, we're all biopsychosocial creatures. And when things get stressful, biologically, our heart rate shoots up, right? For those of you who are familiar with the fight or flight response, we kind of just kick it into gear. And this is a way to say, okay, let's just take a moment. It doesn't take very long, right? And to breathe and reevaluate that situation. So I'm going to review a little bit. So does anyone have any questions about what you saw? Like I said, this is a case study. We just want to break it down a little bit. It's not a case study of we did everything right or we did everything wrong. But what are some of the things that you noticed that you want to bring up, that you want to comment on, that you might have questions on?
Well, there were definitely lots of comments about like, wow, this is so amazing. We're talking about the specific video you just shared, or in general, or are we going to Q&A?
Anything. I'm
Okay.
throwing the door open. I'm throwing the door open.
Okay.
You want
Okay,
in the
great.
chat.
Okay.
So I'll start with that while everybody else is kind of warming up. I don't understand how it started and how we knew it would escalate so quickly. I didn't either. In the moment, it was just happening, right? And like I said, when stuff hits the fan, you just go. And I think a lot of us can relate to that who've covered breaking news. I think part of the reason that you didn't understand how it started is because I am 5 feet 4 inches. I don't know what that is in metric, but I couldn't see, right? Like you saw how thick that crowd was. And from my footage, no one could tell how it started, right? Like maybe we saw people throwing things over the police line. We did see that. We saw a little bit of yelling. If I had been able to play the let me see if I can pull up that clip. But we saw some agitation, but like I didn't know that was going to happen right then and there. And some things that maybe by sheer luck ended up working out well for us was that I was with Amanda. I was with her. We were pressed up against each other right next to her. And so we could be a little bit of eyes and ears for each other. So I didn't actually see you when the police started putting on their gas masks, getting ready to deploy pepper spray and tear gas, but she did. And she said, hey, put your goggles on now. So that was really helpful. I could be your ears a little bit because I had video, remember? So I had a shotgun microphone that was really strong and really directional. And I could actually hear the police commander when he was saying, okay, we're going to break this crowd apart. I had warning for that and I could hold on to Amanda and, not be separated from her. So I'm going to share, let's see if this works now, a little bit more footage of kind of what we were seeing. And I just have taken the sound down so I can keep kind of answering questions in the chat here. Thank you for the conversion. Very, very helpful. It's 162 centimeters, which you can tell. Like, can you tell from this footage, right, that I'm kind of short? Like, I'm looking up at the crowd a little bit. It all goes haywire so fast. Yes, it just kind of happened really quickly. And let me just click play one more time. You can see kind of like, you can feel it too, right? Like, trust your gut when you're hearing that, when you see the clapping and people start playing drums, and it really ramps up the tension and it starts to feel more anxious. So here's, this is a telltale sign. It's police putting on their respirators. Okay, we got a question about heading upwind when the tear gas was released. Really good question. So tear gas is not a gas. It's a misnomer, actually. Tear gas is actually a solid. It is a powder. It's tiny powder particles suspended and propelled by these canisters, these explosive canisters, and they propel those tiny solids into the air. So there's a couple things, just it's a physics lesson, and it's really important because tear gas is heavier than air, so it will sink. It's not going to, float up into the air and dissipate. It's going to sink down. It's going to start covering the ground and everything that's on it. It's going to settle on your clothes. It's going to settle on your skin. If you're not wearing goggles, it's going to settle into your contact lenses. Like, there's a lot of risk there. So that's really important. But the other thing, I remember when I did my first hostile environments and first aid training, we did training on tear gas by using smoke bombs and evaluating which way the wind blew. So that's a really good way to, if you're in a crowd, if you're having trouble navigating, figuring out which way the wind is going. I'm going to answer a couple other questions, and then we're going to go to that tool. I want to make sure that you all have this tool before we run out of time. How did you know you had enough, and how you can go? Okay, so Desiree, you're asking all the right questions. When there's still action, like, how do you know you can leave? And I think that you all saw that push and pull between Amanda and me, right? Where I at some points was like, let's get out of here. Like, we got what we need. We told the story that this kind of, escalated very quickly, and I'm good with that. But Amanda, wanted to get some more, and she needs different things for stills than I need for video, right? And also she was the only photographer, whereas I had another videographer somewhere out there, I thought, getting some footage. So that's a safety conversation too. It's really important to have those conversations with your teams ahead of time to establish boundaries. Everybody has different risk tolerance, and it's really important to respect people's risk appetites and to make sure, because you can't work when you don't feel safe, right? Can any of us do that? I mean, probably not. It's not a good idea. So it's really important to have those conversations with your collaborators and partners before something happens. And I'll talk more about how to do that. And that's something that we didn't do a great job at, right? Like, if this had happened to me and Ramon, like I said, we maybe could have just communicated non-verbally. We kind of know how our patterns and how each other operates. But I didn't have that luxury with Amanda. So that's what we should have done better. I'm going to just read a couple of these other questions and see if I can combine any. Okay, Danielle asked how I was able to multitask. I don't know if you all noticed, but that footage was not good. It was not very usable. So how was I able to multitask? Not very well. I had my camera kind of here. It was one of those mirrorless cameras. And you could, I don't know if you watch this again, if you watch the recording, you can see that my lens hood is cocked to one side and it's cutting off the corners of my image. And I didn't even notice that until after. So that was definitely probably my last priority. And I do want to point out that I had like a level of job security at this point, which is a real privilege. And I don't know, maybe in the back of my head, I was like, I think I had the privilege of saying personal safety is paramount here. And if I didn't get like good stuff, it's okay. Like, I'm not going to lose my job, right? And I personally won't feel like I missed out. And it's more important to me personally to keep myself and my colleagues safe. And I know that not everyone is in that position. So I think awareness of that is really, really important as well. We are not built to multitask as humans. So bringing this back to the psychology lesson of it all a little bit, our brains are, no matter how much you tell yourself you can multitask, we're not designed that way. We can't text and drive. We can't even really talk on the phone and drive 100% safely. And we certainly can't, be focusing on that. So for those of you who've been asked to do photo and video on the same assignment, you know exactly what I mean. It's so hard. It's like it is much more beneficial to focus on one thing and then turn that off and then focus on the next thing. So I just want, don't make multitasking a goal. I'm going to come back to some of these questions maybe and that a little bit later. So I'll just bookmark them maybe for Polly and Danielle, like taking the time before editing the content from Amia. I think that's a good question. I want to come back to that. Let's see. Okay, consequences for photographing criminal activity. I'm definitely going to come back to that. So let's go from the latest question. Let's see. Okay, let's come back to those two and also this idea of protesters being aware of us working, the sense of solidarity from 1:45 Eastern. And then I want to come back now to answer that really important question. Let me get to my slides here. Okay, so this is a question that we got. What happened to Ramon? And so this is a familiar photo. You've seen this before earlier. This was taken after this day had passed, essentially. And so Ramon is standing where he was after he parked the car in an underground parking garage under this mall, this shopping area. And he followed my iPhone location dot very faithfully, and he ended up on this corner, which is the corner opposite where Amanda and I were. So he was probably 20 feet away from us at the end of the day, but he was in another kettle. He was in another group of people who had gotten surrounded by police. So everything that you all probably knew was coming when I introduced the case study and the scenario, it happened. He was separated from us. Because he was separated from us, he was working alone. He ended up getting pepper sprayed because he didn't have Amanda there to say, hey, put your goggles on. And we can actually see exactly what happened to Ramon in this video. And again, let me just, put my video off. So this is a video taken by Mike Baker, who's a New York Times correspondent at the Seattle Times, used to work with us New York Times correspondent in Seattle, used to work with us at the Seattle Times. He's a reporter. He's not a visual journalist, but you can actually see Ramon. Do you kind of see him kind of in the left-hand quadrant with his arm up like this, holding his camera up, his like teal windbreaker? Just try to follow him. You'll see him. He's like holding his camera up throughout this whole footage. This is footage of the exact same moment we just watched, but it is from Mike's perspective instead of mine. So you can't see Amanda and me in this footage, but you can see that first plume of the tear gas that goes up. That's right where Amanda and I are. And everything that follows is that same moment. So let me turn my video off here. So you can see exactly what happens to Ramon in that video, and he gets pushed further and further and further away from us as this event goes on, which is not great. But also one thing I would like to point out about this clip is that this footage, even though it's from an iPhone, and somebody who's not a visual journalist, I personally feel like is much more of a storytelling clip. It tells you what happened in the moment. It kind of shows how the crowd parts, you just have better perspective of it. And it's because Mike was smart enough to climb up a light pole. As you can see, he's elevated above the crowd. He climbed up that pole and got that full picture. Didn't have to put himself in the crowd crush or the stampede or the line of pepper spray. He maintained distance, and it actually shows what happened way more practically. Like, yes, it's a little bit less dramatic, less cinematic, but this is what our audiences needed in that moment to know what was happening and how it unfolded. So that is what happened to Ramon. And I don't know if this will play smoothly, but some scenes of the aftermath that you're seeing here. This is kind of what happened after that moment. And while we watch this, I'm going to look at a few more questions. Got a question about, do I record any voice with information or just have to be totally present and concentrated? I think that's up to you. And I think that's really part of what we're going to look at next is called what's called a risk assessment, is that you need to assess the risk and you need to assess your own capabilities and you need to assess your own limitations and your colleagues and really balance that. So I'm going to give a tool to help balance that. Okay. Okay. So we're going to real quick give you this tool and then we'll come back to some of your questions because I want to make sure that this is the right thing for you. So what could we have done to prepare? What could we have done better to prepare? Which we didn't do at all. If you read the scenario, we did not really prepare. This is what we call a risk assessment template. And so the risk assessment is a wider concept. It's not limited to journalism. If you Google this, there are lots of resources on the concept of a risk assessment. If you Google journalism risk assessment, you're actually going to find templates that other news organizations use, like actually in the day-to-day. And the BBC, I know theirs are public and really easy to find if you search those. But I'm going to give you a really simple one because they're all, at the end of the day, it's all just about figuring out the risks. And you can do this for a specific assignment. So we can do it and we'll actually walk through it for this specific protest. But you could also do it generally and just say, okay, I have a risk assessment that I filled out for all civil unrest in the city of Seattle. And that whenever we cover it, this is what we need to go down. So note your dates, your activity, your location, and then the most simple way to do this is a table. So the first column of the table will be the hazards. Outline what it is that could cause harm or damage. So like I said at the beginning of the presentation, identifying the risk is the most important thing to do first so that we can then know what we're trying to mitigate for. Okay, the second column, you identify who or what is at risk. So for example, it can be yourself. It can be your equipment. You know, somebody, you know, I've been to protests where protesters were really into smashing cameras or really into cutting camera straps and grabbing them from you. It could be your digital security. A lot of you mentioned this at the beginning, hacking, getting access to accounts, doxing, which is when people, antagonists publish your personal information, maybe your address online, which puts you more at risk and makes you more vulnerable. Could be communication, right? Your cell networks can go down, and they did in this protest. It can also be your reputation, which we talked about earlier. So first, identify what the hazard is, and then who is at risk from the hazard. The next few columns, you know, you can do this however you prefer, but this is the way I kind of do it, which is rate the risk. And what I mean by rate the risk is how could this impact you if it plays out, right? So what is the level of risk? Is it negligible? I can still keep covering this. I can still keep doing this assignment if it happens. Or is it critical? Like, no, it's not going to happen, or even could be life-threatening. So I'll use this example, right? Like the hazard could be a crack in the sidewalk, and I myself am at risk of tripping and falling. And if that does happen and I trip and fall, what's the impact of that? It's negligible. You know, probably unless I break a bone or something, it's pretty negligible. I can still finish the assignment. I can still do my job. It's inconvenient. I don't like that it happened. It did cause me harm and very real harm, but I can do that. Whereas, we'll walk through other examples that are more critical later. The likelihood of that happening. So consider the level of risk. Is it unlikely or is it certain, right? And this again can come back to you individually, right? It's not universal. So like I trip a lot when I'm filming. It's just I'm a little clumsy on my feet when I'm focused on something else. So for me, tripping on a crack in the sidewalk is pretty likely. But for somebody else who is much more graceful and coordinated, it might be very unlikely. And it's, these two, so a lot of people confuse the rating and the likelihood, but this is really important because these are two facets that we can control in different ways, right? Like the impact, I could control the tripping on a sidewalk by like wearing knee pads. The likelihood I could control by becoming more graceful and coordinated. I could go to the gym a little more. Maybe I'd take a dance class or something like that. So there's different levers of control on these two columns. And then finally, the column that I think we all are thinking about all the time, which is the risk mitigation. What should we do to control the hazard? What should we do to control this risk? And a few of the questions I'm seeing in the chat directly are related to this. Do we ever scout the area earlier if possible, if we have time? 100%. That is one of the best risk mitigation measures you could put in this last column is I'm going to go check this out ahead of time, because if I check it out ahead of time, I know where the monorail is in relationship to where Nordstrom is, and I know where the Starbucks is for the Wi-Fi and the bathroom and getting water to wash my eyes out. All of those things are important. Another question is, how do you rate the risk before the event? How do you know? Well, honestly, it's your best guess based on the information you have. And be a good reporter, be a good journalist, report it out. One example is the example I'm actually going to use here. So if we were going to fill out a risk assessment for this protest that we just saw, we could identify one of the hazards is tear gas. And how do you rate the risk and how do you know how likely it is? Well, you do your research. If you know that tear gas is pretty dangerous, if you know that tear gas is kind of outlawed and you can't use tear gas in war because it violates international law, then you know that it has a pretty moderate impact on human health and life. If you've done your research and you know that tear gas can actually really negatively impact women's reproductive systems, then you know that this is at least moderate, if not even severe. And the likelihood, again, report it out. If you know that the Seattle Police Department has a large store of tear gas and that they don't hesitate to use it and that you've seen them use it in previous protests, then you know that you can rate this as likely. So filling out a risk assessment is really just journalism. It's just reporting and pre-reporting. It is getting as much information as you can before so that when things happen and unfold really quickly and turn really quickly, you already have the information. You don't have to go get it, right? So depending on time, I was going to maybe fill this out, but I think I'll just ask everyone to go back to the recording, maybe screen grab this template and use it. Think about some other hazards that could potentially be, it can be for maybe if you're going to be sent out on election night, if you're a US photographer, fill it out based on where you're getting sent. What are the risks? Again, think about your identity, your profile, think about the situation. Are you in a place that really leans one way or another politically that will have a very strong reaction if one candidate or another pulls ahead? These are all things that you should think about. And, I think that to my earlier point of safety is not one size fits all, it's one size fits one. Everyone's going to have a different way. So this is a tool I think is really good. And you can also use this tool for digital and some of the cyber threats that we talked about. So I just spun up this example, doxing. Doxing is a really, really clear hazard. You don't want your personal information, your personal address, in some cases, your cell phone number, the names of your family members. You don't want that out there if you are reporting, because you yourself are at risk, your family can be at risk, the reputation of you as a journalist or of the news organization you might be working for can be at risk. You can do things like turning on two-factor authentication, which I wish I had more time to go into some of these digital threats. You can use 1Password, which is a password manager, which just makes everything more secure. And it is free for journalists. So if you are not using a password manager, I really encourage you to Google 1Password for journalists and sign up. And then another thing you could do is sign up for Delete Me. So in the US, there's a lot of data brokers that scrub public records and post addresses online. If you Google yourself, what comes up? Does your address come up? If it does, and you're not okay with that, there's a service called Delete Me that will scrub and request those to get all taken down. And Delete Me has, I believe this is the code for 50% off. But you can reach out to one of us and we can make sure to double check that with you. And so the one caveat about Delete Me is that it is really a US company and it works well on US data brokers. It doesn't work great internationally. We're still looking for a solution internationally. I'm going to quickly breeze through some additional resources that you should feel free to screen grab, and then start answering some of the other questions in the chat. So if you have more questions, please add those to the chat and we'll address those after running through these links. The first is that we obviously did not go through every risk mitigation you could do in a protest or covering civil unrest. The case study was more to show, how I'm thinking in the moment, how we think in the moment, how quickly things can unfold, and how important it is to be prepared. But if you want very specific guidance on how do we create, how do we have that conversation ahead of time? That was something that came up. What gear, if any, should we bring? Should we show our badges or not? What should we be wearing? Can I wear, should I have been wearing those stretchy leggings? The answer is no, because fire can cause burns that will really make synthetic fabrics stick. So you want to stick to natural fibers, so like cotton, linen, etc. But if you want that specific level of detail, this link is really great for that. A lot of the trainings that I've done are in partnership with the International Women's Media Foundation, which I think is how I met both Polly and Danielle. And we have a webinar on this that we did in summer 2020 with Jeff Belzil, who is the IWF Security Director, and gets very, very detailed into setting security and admin points, etc. There are also online courses if you want to deep dive into digital security and make sure, step by step that your accounts are locked down, that they're clean, that they're, that any vulnerabilities are taken care of. There are free online courses, and here's a link to one of them. I will also shout out Journalism Source of Safety, which another one of our instructors this weekend, led that project. And there are a lot of really wonderful, talented photojournalists who also helped with this project. Tara Pixley led the creation of this, and it has all sorts of resources. Almost everything I mentioned you can find on this site. You can find examples of risk assessments. You can find, checklists of what you should do before you go out on assignment. PEN America is also a really, really great resource on online harassment and abuse, as well as the self-care, because that is, again, you cannot separate the biopsychosocial impacts from the actual risks that are happening. And there's also a coalition against online violence. So if you do find yourself on the receiving end of any sort of online violence, and violence very, very specifically, like it does count as violence, even if it's not physical. This is a really great resource to go to. And then more broadly on mental health, there's a lot of lessons that the IWMF provides on its website. If you're in Latin America or if you're a Spanish speaker, the Vida Activa helpline is really wonderful. It's founded by my great friend Lou Ortiz. And if it's any online violence, gender-based violence, any threats to security for journalists or communicators. And then finally, I always have to say this, if you feel that you need a little bit of extra help, you should always seek that. I think that too often when we talk about mental health, we're really thinking about mental illness or disorder, and we think about stigma and shame, and we think about weakness, and especially in this industry historically, how things have happened, but we really shouldn't. And I want to flip that a little bit and say that we really need to talk about mental wellness, just as we talk about physical wellness, right? We eat healthy, we work out, and we should do the same mentally for our mental health too. We should talk to people. You don't have to, and you shouldn't wait until there's a crisis to get help. And the DART Center has this program, the JTSN, Journalist Trauma Support Network, where they've actually trained therapists in certain states. So unfortunately, this isn't available to everyone. But in certain states, they've trained therapists to work with journalists, because too often we've heard therapists say, oh, the news is stressing you out, turn off the news. And we can't do that as journalists, right? So these are a set of therapists who are really trained to address those concerns in a way that is productive for our specific community. If that is not available to you, every jurisdiction, every geography has different resources, licensing requirements. Unfortunately, I can't cover them all, but I would be more than happy to try to point you in the right direction if you really don't know where to start. So that was a lot of resources. I mean, I could spend hours and hours and hours. I know we only have like 5 more minutes to do this. So I wanted to just see if there were any like burning questions that I could get back to you. Yeah.
Wow. I just want to repeat that what Corinne said at the beginning. This is just, a little appetizer to, continuing your journey to researching physical, digital, and personal, like soul, heart safety. But Corinne, like I dropped in the chat that I had seen you speak earlier this year, and even now I'm just like hanging on every word. I mean, it's just so important to think about, to have this just be as important as like what gear you're using, or so thank you so much for walking us through this. You're so brilliant. And also, y'all make sure you check out Corinne's website, because her work too, like as a video journalist, is just so impactful. So yeah, it was cool that you were able to answer a lot of questions like during the presentation. That was awesome to have that interaction. But one thing, so we had a couple of those lingering questions, but I did want to just touch on something that we didn't go super into, just like, is this something we should even be thinking about? But we talked about own personal safety, but what are some things that we can keep in mind to keep the people we photograph safe? Like how much of that too is our job and responsibility? And there is so much happening in the chat. People are applauding.
Well, thank you. Thanks, everyone. And I'm so glad you asked that question, because I think it's so important. And again, like, I'm going to just summarize what I want you all to, you should all take away what you personally take away. But what I want you to take away is this is a community effort. The editorial discussion is a safety discussion. Okay, now I can't sum it up in one sentence, but to answer the question, like, that is so important to think about. And let me just talk about how this footage was actually subject to a subpoena from the Seattle Police Department. You saw the fire that happened, right? And that fire was from people setting some police cars on fire, 6 police cars on fire, and stealing the assault rifles out of the trunks of those police cars, which is a serious, serious federal crime, right? They were not able to recover all of those rifles to this day. And in the immediate, in response to that, the Seattle Police Department subpoenaed professional journalism video from that event, which is not something I was expecting. And so if I had that personal experience before this, would I have rolled right on through and shown all of that footage? Probably not, because first of all, I would never hand that footage over, journalistic ethics wise. That's privileged source information. But I never in a million years kind of imagined that would happen. And thankfully the NPPA, National Press Photographers Association, helped us kind of fight that subpoena, and they ended up dropping it, and we never did have to hand that over. But what a nightmare that could have been, right? So I do think that we need to be thinking about what we're filming and photographing and not just like spray indiscriminately. That's very important to be intentional about that. And it's again, it comes back to what do we need to tell the story? You know, we don't need everything to tell the story. And this comes with practice, especially for those of you who might be students or earlier in your career. I know that can seem really hard and a daunting thing to think about. But it's something that we have to practice. You know, at this point, I could probably go out and I know exactly, like I could film something and I know that I'm going to use every single shot and nothing more, nothing less. It takes a while to get there, but you know, making that a goal is actually a safety conversation. And you know, I think also the idea of what is informed consent is something that I'm glad that we've been talking about more in our industry, because I think that's also a safety consideration on many levels for us, for our sources, for everyone involved in every issue of every story. So you know, having those conversations with your editors is very important. So I'll leave it there.
Thank you so much. And again, there's so many good points that you've touched on. And like you said, we won't be able to get to everything. This is just a great, I think, starting point for those who have never even thought about these different types of risk. I mean, you opened my eyes to even more risks I didn't consider were risks, but I'm like, oh, that makes sense. There's two more questions that we want to ask to be mindful of time. You gave us an example of, you and your coworkers, your colleagues out in the field. What if you were by yourself? Would you then recommend, sharing your location to a friend, as somebody's pointed out in the chat? Or what advice do you have for somebody who may be doing this on your own? And in that same instance, you shared some of the resources for a lot of things that could be helpful to those who are based in the US, the States. For those who are maybe international, what advice do you have for them as somebody asks about maybe their country is not so developed, so they don't have a lot of local resources or physical protection? What advice would you have for them?
Okay, good questions. I'm going to address the location one first. And like everything, location sharing can be good or it can be bad. And it's good and bad, and it's very complicated. I think if you're working alone, and especially if you're working in like a situation like we saw, like, yeah, it would be really beneficial. And in fact, when I was doing a lot of work on the border, we actually had GPS trackers so that our security team could see, what side of the border are we on at any given time, like down to the car that we were in crossing, and that uses satellite. Phone locations are not as precise. So that is why Ramon ended up at Nordstrom Rack when we were at Nordstrom. So that's one thing to keep in mind. And the other thing is that it drains your battery very, very quickly. And then the last thing I will say, which is very unlikely, but I just have to say it, is that if someone else gains access to that, like if maybe the person you're sharing a location with is hacked, or somebody sees their phone who you don't want to know your location, then they know your location. So really think about, it's always a cost benefit analysis. Like, is it more important for somebody to know where I am right now because I'm at risk of potentially getting arrested or getting separated, versus, what risks could it create, which is maybe my phone's going to die and I don't have an extra battery pack. So what are some ways to mitigate that? Yeah, unfortunately, most of the time we're all going to be working alone, right? Best practice is to have someone else as a back watcher, and even better would have been if Amanda and I had switched off. Like one of us could work while one of us was just helping watch, right? Not both of us working at the same time, because then we have the blinders on, we have like a horse. But it doesn't always work out that way. And so I would encourage you to watch that link of the strategies for safely covering civil unrest. Because we'll talk about, having one example is having a security point or an admin point where I set an alarm on my phone every 30 minutes. And even though Danielle and I need to go cover totally different things for different news organizations, every 30 minutes, our alarm goes off, we meet back at this corner and we know that each other is safe, right? So, doing things like that, even if the person works for a different news organization, we had a thread during the Seattle protests when it got even into a bigger movement. We had a WhatsApp group with like everyone who was covering it on the ground from every news organization. And that was really, really helpful in helping keep each other safe. On the international question, Yeah, I mean, I think that most of this is pretty universal advice. I will say, like the few location-based things were like delete me and the therapist resources, which there's specific licensing for geography. But like, please use all of these techniques, no matter where you are in the world. The risk assessment is very universal. The underlying question I heard there was like, well, I don't have a lot of resources, so what do I do? And that's part of why I chose the risk assessment as the concept to focus on for this session, because anyone can do that. And I know not everyone can get the PPE that you saw us wearing in the picture. I know that not everyone can like pay for a training to do hostile environments, but I think I just want to demystify safety and security a little bit, because you don't have to be an expert. You don't have to be like expertish military, like so many of these guys who are in this industry are. You could be, like me, just a journalist who's gone through some hairy situations. And it just requires some teamwork and some critical thinking, right? What can we do? If we can't do this, can we do that? If we can't get these respirators with these cartridges from the hardware store, what about a KN95 mask? That still blocks 95% of particles, and it can get you enough, if you have a good seal, to get out of a situation. Just a disposable mask like that can do so much. If you don't have the ballistic goggles, well, just a chemical splash goggles, or even a pair of glasses that are shatterproof is going to stop a rubber bullet from landing in your eye, right? So there's always going to be something you can do to mitigate the risk. And again, there's going to be nothing you can do to completely eliminate the risk, short of just not going at all. So I know that it can feel really tough if you don't have access to a lot of resources, but just know that even people with the best resources still end up in situations where if they're not using those resources properly, and they're not collaborating with their colleagues and partners, and they're not respecting the people around them, and they're putting a target on their back, they can have much worse outcomes than you can if you're just resourceful and collaborative, and you prepare and you plan ahead with the people you're working with.
No, I think this is so, so, so helpful. Somebody even asked about like, what's it like, advice for going into someone's home. And I think what you just said, it doesn't even have to be like out in the field. This is like, if you have to go into somebody's home, like this, like tell somebody you're gonna be going photographing this person at their home. If you don't hear from me in an hour, call me or whatever it has to be. I think, like you said, these tools and resources can be utilized for any scenario. It doesn't have to be out in the field. It can be in somebody's home or whatever your assignment may be. And I just remembered something else. You mentioned like IWMF, and I love, love, love that organization. A lot of the work they do offer like free resources. So like the safety trainings, like in-person trainings, you can get funding from them for that. I don't know if they still have it, but they had like a therapy fund. So please do check it out to see if they still have that for like, they'll give you a grant to utilize for mental health therapy costs. So do check them out. Check out, yes, ACOS Alliance. They also provide free trainings as well. So do check it out. And I know some people have had luck, telling editors, hey, I want to take this course. Would you consider would you pay for me to do this type of training or whatever to be certified? So thank you so much. I know we have a lot more that we could dive into, but we are at time. Danielle, do you have anything you'd like to say?
Yeah, I'm just like, I mean, I just feel so grateful that we could have you here with us today, Corinne, to at least give us a pretty good foundation and start and things that we should think about. So I think so often, like you've mentioned, I mean, we're thinking about the photo, we're thinking about the story, it's like safety is kind of a last priority, but it really shouldn't be. So I really am just so appreciative that you were able to share your knowledge with us and your wisdom to help us remember that should be the first thing that we're thinking about. So thank you. It was truly a privilege to have you here with us today. And yeah, so just thank you, Corinne. And also, are those your Emmys?
Okay,
Yes.
okay. I was like, did
Yeah,
you see that?
yeah.
Like,
So
look at that
yeah,
little
for real,
flex.
for real. Yeah, I mean, Corinne is an amazing video journalist, so I really, really mean it. That was how I first came across you and your work, was through your video work in Mexico. So yeah, Corinne, you're such a badass. We're so lucky to have had you here with us today. So thank you again. And with that, yeah, oh my gosh,
Thank you,
Polly,
Vanessa Rock. I cannot believe it.
yeah, let me do our little thing, do our little.
Yes.
Good, we
Okay,
good, we
y'all.
good, right? Yeah. Oh, but wow, what an amazing kickoff to the weekend, right, Polly?
We packed in quite a bit for day one. If you missed any part of today's classes, don't worry. Everything has been recorded. And again, they will be transcribed in other languages as well, French and Spanish. So if you missed out on any part of anybody's class, they are all recorded and will be made available on their respective sites. And tomorrow we'll be back for day two, which will be another packed day of incredible resources. And some of this is actually a good segue into what we've alluded to. Tomorrow we kick off talking about continuing the conversation about sustaining our practice, but specifically on getting funding for our projects, especially like long-term documentary work. We also have another conversation that kind of touches on like the risks aspect, but specifically AI. This concept like has been how it has evolved in the last, few years. So we'll have Tara Pixley talking about the risks of AI, what to think about, what to figure out, how we can protect ourselves as we are in this evolving digital age. And then we'll have some photo editors and photographers sharing their long-term work, sharing how they find work, sharing what they look for when hiring, sharing how they've worked together as a photographer and editor. So if you enjoyed day one, you will definitely enjoy day two, and we will hope to see you again back tomorrow.
Yeah, so back tomorrow, 10 a.m. New York time, and it's the same link you received when registering. So just the same link, come back. We can't wait for tomorrow. And before we sign off for the day, we just want to thank Photo Wings again, our partner in creating the essentials. This seriously would not be possible without them. And again, thank you to the folks at the Everyday Projects who have been helping behind the scenes, to the one and only Polly, again, founder
One
of
and only Danielle.
And yeah, we can't wait for tomorrow. Thanks everyone. Thanks to everyone for joining. Thanks to our incredible speakers. We love this and we love hearing from y'all. We love hearing from the speakers. So we cannot wait for day two tomorrow.
I know, and I've already been seeing some folks share on IG stories and on Twitter some of the gems and takeaways they've had. So feel free to continue sharing, keep tagging us. We love to see it. Keep tagging and following our speakers, and also just let us know what you want to see in future iterations. But yes, for now, get some rest for those who are based internationally and it's the evening, or have a beautiful rest of your day for those who still have daylight left. Thank you all, and we'll see you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow. Bye.